Smoke rose from the broken metal ship as the sun set on the strange alien planet. The jungle around the wreck was quiet, too quiet. Trees stood tall like silent guards, their glowing leaves moving slowly in the soft wind. Bird-like creatures watched from above but made no sound. Something had arrived here that didn't belong. Inside the wreck, a man groaned and opened his eyes. His head pounded, his mouth dry, and every muscle in his body ached. His name was Cole, a human engineer from Earth. He was the only one left after the crash. Blood stained his uniform, and his leg was badly cut. He tried to move, but pain shot through his body. Still, he crawled out of the wreckage, dragging himself toward a flat patch of grass. There he lay, breathing heavily, staring at the two moons above. He didn't know where he was, but he knew he had to survive. From behind the thick vines, yellow eyes watched him. A girl, not human, but not completely alien either, stood hidden in the shadows. Her skin was soft gray with a slight shimmer, and her white hair flowed like liquid. She had never seen a human before, only heard stories. Stories told by her elders of creatures from the stars who brought fire and metal. She stepped closer, her bare feet silent on the mossy ground. Cole didn't see her, not yet. He was too busy building a small fire using broken wires and flammable cloth. His hands shook from pain, but he kept going. He knew night would bring colder winds and maybe worse. The alien girl tilted her head. Curious about this creature, he looked hurt, slow, and weak, but his eyes burned with will. She felt something strange in her chest, a flutter she didn't understand. Her people stayed hidden from outsiders, but something about this human made her stay. Later that night, Cole sat by the fire, shivering. He chewed on a protein bar slowly, trying to ignore the pain in his leg. Suddenly, he heard a soft rustle. He grabbed a sharp piece of metal and looked around. "Who's there?" he called, voice hoarse. No answer came, only the flicker of light reflecting off silver eyes. Then the girl stepped out from the trees. Her hands raised, she said nothing, just stared at him. Cole stared back, confused, surprised, and half afraid. She moved closer, slowly, like approaching a wild animal. He noticed her soft features, her small frame, and the way her eyes studied him. He didn't lower his weapon, but he didn't lift it either. She pointed to his leg, then placed her hand on her own thigh. Cole understood. She saw he was hurt. "I'm fine," he lied, though his face was pale. She came even closer, then knelt beside him. Her fingers hovered above his wound, glowing faintly with blue light. Cole winced as she touched him, but then the pain faded. He blinked in confusion. "Who? What are you?" he whispered. The girl didn't answer. She only pressed her fingers to his forehead gently. Then she sat back, her expression unreadable. She looked down, and suddenly her head tilted in confusion. She noticed a strange shape under the human's pants, something swollen. It twitched slightly when she looked at it. Thinking it was a wound, she reached out. Cole's eyes widened. "Wait, don't." But she already touched it, rubbing gently. Cole groaned, half in pain, half in shock. The girl pulled her hand back fast, alarmed, not hurt. She asked, finally speaking in broken English. "No, no," he said, embarrassed, covering himself with his jacket. "It's not that kind of injury." She blinked, confused. "Then why it grow?" she asked with innocent honesty. He had no words, just a red face and shaky laugh. Suddenly, a loud growl echoed through the jungle. Both of them froze. Cole grabbed his weapon, and the girl stood protectively in front of him from the trees. Glowing red eyes appeared. Something was coming, something big. The girl reached behind her and pulled a strange curved blade from her back. Cole realized then she wasn't just curious, she was dangerous when needed. The creature stepped forward, revealing sharp claws and thick skin. The girl gave Cole one quick glance, then charged without fear. Cole watched as she leaped into the air, faster than any human. The firelight flashed on her blade as it struck the beast's neck. Blood sprayed, and the monster roared in pain. Within seconds, it fell, twitching, then lay still. She turned back to Cole, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths. He stared in awe. "You saved me," he said quietly. She nodded, then sat beside him again. Swelling still there, she whispered. He groaned again, this time from something deeper than pain. Cole didn't sleep much that night, even though the jungle had grown quiet after the monster's death. The fire cracked gently, casting shadows on the girl's calm face as she sat beside him with her legs crossed. She didn't speak again, just watched the sky as if waiting for something else to fall from it. Cole's legs still throbbed, but her strange healing touch had slowed the bleeding. He didn't know how it worked, and he didn't ask, not yet. He was more focused on the confusion between them, especially after what she had touched earlier. His face flushed every time he remembered it, and she noticed it each time with curious eyes. The girl leaned closer once, tilting her head like a scientist examining a strange new creature. She pointed to her chest, then to his groin again, and made a confused face. Cole sighed, wiping his hand across his mouth, unsure how to explain something like human biology to someone who clearly had never seen a male before. He tried to say it was normal, that it wasn't dangerous, that it had to do with attraction. But she didn't know the word. She just blinked slowly and asked again. "It hurt?" "No," he muttered. "It's just complicated." She didn't understand the word either, so she waited in silence, studying him as if time didn't exist. When morning came, the heat rose quickly, and flies buzzed around the old wreck. Cole tried to stand, but failed, collapsing. With a grunt, his leg couldn't take the weight, and the jungle around him spun like a storm. The girl ran to his side and caught him with surprising strength. He rested against her shoulder, breathing hard, feeling weaker by the second. The sweat on his skin made her nose twitch, and she leaned closer as if trying to sniff something. Hidden, her hands touched his chest gently, pressing over his heart. Then she closed her eyes, her own body starting to glow slightly. Cole felt warmth flooding into him, like soft electricity humming through his veins, but it didn't last long. Suddenly, she gasped and pulled her hand away. She looked startled, staring at her own glowing fingers. Cole asked what was wrong, but she shook her head, whispering something in her own language. Then she spoke in broken English again. "You feel change," she said, her voice trembling. "What change?" he asked, feeling lightheaded. "You not sick?" "But not same," she said, confused and worried. She didn't know how to explain what she felt in his body, but she had sensed something deep, something shifting as the day passed. She started to mimic human actions, trying to learn how he moved, how he ate, how he built things. She watched closely every time he used his hands or spoke, repeating words softly under her breath. When he pointed to the sky and said cloud, she said it too. When he touched a leaf and said green, she repeated, smiling. But every now and then, her gaze would drop to his groin again, and she would ask with innocent wonder, "Still there?" He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was like babysitting someone curious, but also more powerful than he could ever be. Later, when he rested by the fire again, she brought something from the forest. It was a thick, sweet-smelling paste made from crushed fruits and glowing herbs. She gently rubbed it into the wound on his leg, humming softly. Her hands were warm, and her touch was careful. Cole felt his body relax, though his heart pounded for reasons he didn't fully understand. He watched her face in the firelight. Focused she was, how peaceful, how close. He wanted to ask her name, but wasn't sure if she had one he could even pronounce. Instead, he tapped his chest and said, "Cole." She blinked, then slowly touched her own chest. "Zura," she whispered, almost shyly. He smiled. Repeating it, "Zura." They shared water from a cracked metal container. Passing it back and forth, she didn't seem afraid anymore. Not of him, not of his injuries, not even of the swelling she kept glancing at. But that night, as he lay half asleep, he woke suddenly to find her sitting beside him again. She was studying his face closely, but her fingers gently brushed over his stomach, then lower. He caught her hand quickly, not in anger, but in shock. "Zura? Why?" he asked quietly. She paused, thinking hard. "You? Different," she said slowly. "Me never see like you." Cole didn't answer, just stared at her glowing eyes, wondering how someone could be so alien and so human at the same time. She pulled her hand away finally, curling her fingers against her palm. Then, in a small voice, she added, "You make me feel warm." He didn't know what to say, so he just laid back, staring at the stars above. The jungle was quiet again, but not silent. Something had changed between them. Something more than curiosity, and even though danger still lived in the shadows, in that moment he no longer felt alone. Zora's blade still dripped with blood from the last beast she had slain. But her eyes were not on the weapon, they were on Cole. He was trying to walk again, leaning on a broken metal rod like a cane. He stumbled forward, breathing hard, sweat rolling down his neck. Zura stayed close behind him, her arms out, ready to catch him if he fell. He didn't want help, but he needed it. His body was strong. But not enough, not on this wild planet. Not yet. Birds screamed above the trees, and vines shifted like snakes in the wind. Something in the air felt wrong, heavy, as if the planet itself had paused to listen. Cole stopped walking and looked around. "What is it?" he whispered. Zora's head tilted, her long ears twitching slightly. Her fingers touched the ground, then her skin turned pale. "Something come," she said quietly. "Not beast, not animal. Different." They moved quickly, finding shelter in the half-buried hull of the crashed ship. Zora pushed aside metal panels and cleared space inside. It wasn't safe, but it was better than being in the open. As they waited in the dark, Cole's breath slowed, but the pain in his leg flared again. Zura looked at him, then crawled beside him. She placed her hand over his wound and closed her eyes. A warm light spread from her palm again. Cole felt it not just on the surface, but deeper, like something was stirring in his bones. But this time, the light moved too far, too fast. His whole body jerked suddenly, and he let out a gasp. Zura pulled back in surprise, blinking fast. "You?" "React," she said softly. He nodded, trying to catch his breath. "I felt it. Everywhere," he whispered. Like a jolt. Then, from outside, came a different sound. Not a growl, not a scream. It was metal, crunching metal. Zura pushed Cole flat on the floor and covered his mouth gently. He didn't argue. Through a crack in the hull, they saw something moving two-legged, armored, scanning the crash with glowing eyes. Zura's breath caught in her throat. She knew what it was, and she whispered in her language, her voice shaking. "Collectors." Cole didn't understand the word, but the fear in her eyes told him enough. These weren't beasts. These were intelligent and deadly. The collector turned slowly, holding a staff that pulsed with blue energy. It moved past their hiding spot, scanning, pausing, then moving again. Zura didn't move, didn't blink. Cole's heart pounded so loud he was sure it could be heard. But the thing left, disappearing into the trees. They didn't speak for a long time. Only when the sun returned and the jungle began to breathe again did Zura relax. She sat back against the wall, her eyes wide with thought. "They no find you," she said. "They want live humans." Cole looked at her, puzzled. "Why?" She hesitated, then said, "Blood. They take blood, mix with other things." They make soldiers. His stomach turned. He realized he was lucky to be alive. But now, he was not just injured, he was hunted. And Zura. She wasn't just helping him for kindness. She had chosen to stand between him and something far worse. That night, as the fire crackled low, she came to sit beside him again. Her movements were slower, more careful. She didn't touch his wounds. This time, only watched his face. "You different from what I learn?" She whispered, "You fight pain with smile." He chuckled lightly. "It's called being stubborn." She repeated the word slowly. "Stubborn." Then she smiled too. The silence between them felt warmer than the fire. Cole leaned back. Looking at the sky, stars flickered above, and 2 moons glowed like watchful eyes. Zora leaned beside him, her arm brushing his. She didn't pull away, and neither did he. Their closeness no longer felt strange. It felt needed. Like the only real thing left in a world that wanted them gone. But before sleep could claim them, Zora's hands slowly slid over his stomach again. Cole's eyes opened wide, but he didn't stop her. She reached the spot she had touched before, the one that confused her so much it reacted again. She asked gently. He nodded, barely breathing. "Yes. It reacts to you." She stared at her hand, then slowly whispered, "Then I won't be afraid." The firelight flickered one last time before fading into the shadows, and outside the metal shell, the jungle waited in silence. He was burning from the inside, not from fire, not from touch, but from something he couldn't name. Cole's eyes opened in a rush, but he saw nothing clearly. His vision spun in circles, colors twisting like smoke in water. Voices echoed in his ears, familiar ones, distant ones, some angry, some crying. He tried to stand but couldn't feel his legs. He reached out, but his hand passed through light instead of air. And in the middle of all that, a soft voice called his name. Not from Earth, not human, but hers. Zura sat beside him with both hands pressed against his chest, glowing softly. Her face showed no fear. Only worry, only warmth. She had been there. For hours, watching over him as his fever climbed higher and higher. He had started shaking in his sleep, whispering strange words, names she didn't know. Mom, Captain Reeves, Amelia, Zura, didn't know who they were, but she held his hand tightly. As if it would keep him from floating away, he muttered things in dreams, strange things. "Don't press the button, she's gone. It's my fault." Zura didn't understand the meaning, but pain in his voice made her chest feel heavy. She leaned closer and touched her forehead to his. "You not alone," she whispered. "Me here." Inside his mind, something shifted. The light cleared for a moment. And Cole saw her Zura standing in a white jungle, holding out her hand. He took it, and warmth poured into his chest. Then suddenly, his body jerked and his eyes snapped open. He gasped for air like someone pulled from deep water. Sweat covered him, his hair soaked, his shirt clinging to his skin. Zura let out a soft breath and touched his cheek gently. "You wake," she said with a small smile. Cole blinked at her, then nodded slowly, still dizzy. "What? What happened? You sick?" "Dream too much," she said, her hand brushing his forehead. "You shake? Say names." He closed his eyes again and rested his head against her shoulder. "I was somewhere else," he whispered, "but I could hear you," she smiled, her fingers running through his damp hair slowly. "I call you many times," she said softly. "You find way back." They sat in silence for a while. The fever had passed. But something else stayed, Cole felt. Different, not broken, not weak, but like something deep in him had shifted. Like a new part had woken up when Zura pulled her hand away. He saw her fingers glowing brighter than before. "Zura," he said, watching her skin flicker with light. "Did I do that?" She looked down at her hand and nodded once. You? Change me, she said, almost like a secret. Cole sat up with effort, rubbing his eyes. He didn't know what to say, so he said the only thing he could. Are you okay? She smiled and nodded again. Yes, but... Feel strange, she said, placing her hand on her chest. Inside, they both stared at each other, confused and quiet. Then Cole chuckled, weakly but honest. Maybe we're both changing, he said. And maybe that's okay. Zura tilted her head and copied his smile. I like your laugh, she said simply. He raised a brow. Really? She nodded. It sounded like sky after storm, for the first time since the crash. He didn't feel like a broken piece of metal. He felt alive. But just as that moment settled between them, something exploded in the distance. A red flare lit the sky far away. Cole's heart skipped. That's not natural, he said, sitting up straighter. Zora stood quickly. Eyes narrowed, her body tense like a wildcat ready to run. They both knew what that meant. Someone else was alive, or someone else had arrived. Cole pushed himself to his feet, using the wall for balance. I need to go, he said. Zora stepped in front of him, blocking the exit. No, she said. Too weak, I have to, he replied. That might be another survivor. Zora looked down, her jaw tight. Or trap, she said. He hesitated, looking into her eyes. He knew she was right. But he also knew what it felt like to be the one left behind. I won't go far, he said. Just close enough to see. Zora stared at him. Then slowly reached behind her and gave him her blade. He took it with a nod. Then she added one quiet word. Promise. He gave her a small smile. I promise. As he limped out into the jungle, Zora stood at the edge of the ship and watched him go. Her fingers brushed over the spot where her hand had glowed. She didn't know what was happening between them, but something had started. Something neither of them could stop now, and deep in her heart, she knew if anything happened to him, the swelling in her own chest would never go away. Asterisk. Zora had never felt afraid of silence until now. She stood alone outside the shipwreckage, staring into the jungle where Cole had disappeared. The sounds of birds and wind returned, but they felt distant, hollow. Every minute felt like 100. Heartbeats, each one louder than the last. She had given him her blade. But it didn't stop the sharp fear climbing her chest. She had been born to a quiet world, a hidden people, no emotions, no risk, no pain. But now, because of him, her chest was burning. Cole limped through the thick trees, his mind spinning with questions. Was the flare a distress signal, a trap, or worse, someone else from his ship twisted by this planet? He ducked under glowing vines and stepped over roots that moved like slow snakes. His leg hurt, but Zura's healing still pulsed inside it. Like a second heartbeat, he gripped her curved blade tightly, more for comfort than defense. As he moved closer to the red smoke rising from the hill, he heard its metal footsteps, slow, scanning. He dropped flat to the ground and crawled behind a fallen log. Ahead, a strange figure stood near the crashed beacon. It wasn't human, but it wore something human-made, like stolen armor. Its face was covered by a visor that clicked and hummed, scanning the area with red light. Cole's mouth went dry. This wasn't rescue. This was a collector scout, searching for live DNA, searching for him. He turned to sneak back, but his hand slipped on wet moss. The sound was small, but the creature froze, then turned its head toward him. Red lights swept over the area. Blinking faster, Cole held his breath. Pressing into the mud, the thing stepped closer, 1 foot at a time, blade spinning in its hand. Just when it leaned forward to strike, something blurred through the trees and slammed into it. Zura, she didn't wait, didn't speak, just moved. Her foot struck the creature's side and sent it tumbling back, Before it could rise, her blade was at its throat. The creature hissed, metal grinding against itself. Zura stabbed once, fast and deep, and the red light in its eyes faded. She turned to Cole, breathing hard, her hands shaking. "I said trap," she whispered. Voice sharp, Cole sat up, covered in mud, heart pounding. "I know," he said, "but I had to see Zura." Dropped beside him, pulling him into her arms without warning. "Stupid human," she muttered. "You make me fear." He didn't answer. Just held her tight. Her body was warm, trembling against his. It was the first time she showed real fear. Not for herself, but for him. Cole leaned back, looking into her glowing eyes. "Zura," he said, voice low, "why do you care so much?" She looked away at first, then slowly answered, "You feel." "Part of me now." They stayed like that for a while, listening to the forest breathe again. Then Zura stood up and helped Cole to his feet. "We move," she said. "Not safe here now. Where to?" He asked. She pointed east, toward thick fog and tall trees covered in silver moss. "Sacred forest," she said. "No machines go there." They traveled slowly, the path growing colder and dimmer as they moved, the deeper they went. The quieter the jungle became. No birds, no wind. Only the sound of their footsteps and Cole's heavy breaths. Zora walked ahead, watching for traps. Cole watched her, trying to ignore the strange ache in his chest. It wasn't just pain, it was something else, something new. Later, when they made camp under glowing roots, Cole sat with his back to a stone wall. Zura crouched beside a small flame, heating soft fruit in her hands. The light made her skin shimmer like metal dust. She looked up at him, then down again, as if nervous. "Something happened to me," she said. Cole nodded. "Yeah. Me too." She touched her chest just above her heart. "It felt tight." "But good tight," she said softly. Cole smiled. "That's called emotion." "Too much," she whispered. "Never feel before. Now can't stop." She crawled closer and sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder. Her fingers brushed his arm gently, almost like testing heat. "You still react?" she asked, glancing down at his swelling again with innocent curiosity. Cole choked on his breath, half laughing, half flustered. "I mean?" "Yeah," he said, embarrassed. "Why?" she asked with a small frown. "Me touch before, not fix it." He closed his eyes. "Zaru. It's not something broken. It happens when." He stopped, then looked at her slowly. "When you're close." Zora tilted her head, thinking deeply. Then she smiled again. "Then me stay close," she said simply. Cole didn't argue. He just let her rest her head on his shoulder, and in that cold, strange forest, full of danger and fog, they both felt a warmth, stronger than anything else. The silence was broken by a scream, but it wasn't human. It echoed from the edge of the sacred forest, deep and sharp like a dying machine. Zura opened her eyes in an instant, pulling her blade into her hands. Cole woke beside her, blinking fast, his heartbeat already racing. They had been resting beside glowing roots, wrapped in silence and strange comfort. Now that comfort was gone, replaced by the sound of something hunting in the dark. Zora stood quickly and scanned the shadows between the trees. Her glowing eyes flickered as if reading the forest itself. Cole pushed himself up, still sore but more steady now. He reached for a broken metal rod he had sharpened at one end. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. "What was that?" he asked, his voice low. "Not beast," Zura answered. "Something else." She moved like a shadow between trees, her bare feet silent on the damp earth. Cole followed, trying not to slow her down. Each step deeper into the forest felt heavier, colder, like the trees were watching them. Suddenly, they heard voices, muffled, rough, speaking in a language Cole did understand this time. Human, He froze, turning toward the sound. Zura pulled him behind a thick root wall and placed a hand over his chest. Two figures stepped into view, both wearing torn uniforms and carrying small glowing devices. One of them was limping badly. The other kept looking around nervously. "Survivors," Cole whispered. But Zura didn't look relieved. She shook her head slowly. "No. Not same anymore." Before Cole could ask what she meant, the limping man stopped and dropped to his knees. The other reached out hand suddenly. The limping man screamed, his body twisted, metal spikes pushing out from his arms. His eyes turned silver, and then red coal covered his mouth in shock. The man wasn't injured, he had been changed. Zora whispered a word in her language that had no translation, but it tasted like sorrow. "They not survivors," she said. "They taken the other humanoid." What looked like a human knelt beside the transforming man and began humming. Then it turned and looked straight toward the trees. Cole's breath froze. It couldn't have seen them. Yet it stared as if it had. "We go," Zora said firmly, grabbing his arm. They ran through the forest, deeper into the mist. Branches slapped their arms. Roots tripped their feet. But they didn't stop. Behind them, the humming grew louder. More voices joining in. Not machine, not alien, but voices of those who used to be human. When they finally stopped near a glowing stone arch, Zura fell to her knees and breathed heavily. Cole sat beside her, his legs shaking from the sprint. "Zura, what were they?" he asked. "Collector's tools," she said. "They find survivors, change them, use their bodies." Cole looked back toward the trees, sweat cold on his skin. "I could have ended up like that." Zura nodded slowly, her hand gently brushing his face. "But you didn't," she said. "You, still you." They sat in silence again. But it wasn't peaceful. Something had changed between them and the world around them. It was no longer just survival, it was war. Not between armies, but between what was real and what was stolen. As Cole leaned back, trying to rest his head, he noticed Zura's hand trembling slightly. "Zura," he said gently, "you okay?" She didn't answer right away. Then, in a voice quieter than a whisper, she said, "I feel things. I don't know how to stop." Cole reached out and took her hand, holding it tight. "You don't have to stop," he said. "Feeling is human. And maybe it's part of you now, too." Zura looked at him, her eyes wide and soft. Then she slowly leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then I be part human," she whispered. Almost like a promise. He didn't laugh this time. Didn't blush or look away. He just nodded, because out of everything strange on this planet, her words were the most real thing he had. They stayed that way under the stone arch, resting side by side, but neither of them noticed the pair of red eyes, watching from above, quiet, patient, waiting for night to fall. Asterisk. It started with a soft sound, a drip, 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 echoing through the trees like a heartbeat. Cole opened his eyes slowly, not because of noise, but because of the feeling. Something was wrong, not outside, but deep inside him. His skin felt too hot, his chest too tight. He sat up in the cold mist of morning and saw Zura standing alone at the edge of the glowing stone arch. She was staring at the trees, her back straight, her fingers trembling slightly. Her skin shimmered more than before, almost pulsing with a soft light. He called her name, but she didn't answer. Instead, she took a slow breath and turned to face him, her eyes wide, bright, and afraid. "Cole," she said, her voice breaking. "They know." He stood up fast, holding the blade she gave him. "Who?" She pointed into the woods, where red lights began to glow. 3, then 5. Then 10. "They come now," she whispered. "For you." "For me." Cole's grip tightened around the hilt. But he knew this wasn't a fight they could win by force. These were not beasts, not machines, not survivors. These were collectors, and they had followed their scent through the fog and silence. Zura moved quickly, grabbing a sack of herbs and tools she had prepared days ago. She shoved a glowing root into Cole's hand. "You go east, find river. Follow it, hide," she said. He shook his head, stepping closer. "No, not without you." She smiled, and it hurt more than any wound. "You not understand?" she said, placing her hand on his chest. "They want what inside us." Cole realized what she meant. Her touch, her healing. The changes he had felt, they weren't random. Their bond had made something new. Something the collectors had never seen. And now they wanted to capture it, study it, break it. "I'll stay," she said, voice calm. "Lead them away." Cole grabbed her wrist, heart pounding. "No, we run together." Zura leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. Her breath was soft, her lips only inches away, if they catch both. "It ends," she whispered, "but if one lives, it begins." He had no words, only silence. Then she reached into her belt and placed something in his palm. A silver shard, warm and pulsing. "My light," she said. "It remember me. It protects you." He held it tight as she kissed his cheek gently. Then she stepped away. Toward the red lights, she turned once more and gave him a smile filled with sadness and strength. "Stay human," she said, "and remember me, Cole." Watched as she vanished into the fog, her body becoming part of the forest. Then he turned and ran, limping at first, then faster. The forest opened around him, vines moving aside like they knew what he carried. The river appeared just as she said, wide and silver under the pale sky. He followed it until his legs gave out, and he collapsed beside a fallen tree. He looked at the shard again, still warm, still alive. He pressed it to his heart and closed his eyes. Days passed, maybe more. Then a ship landed silently near the river, its wings folding like petals. Humans stepped out. Soldiers, doctors, rescuers, they found him asleep, still holding the shard. When they scanned his body, they couldn't explain what had happened, but something in him was different. Stronger, they asked questions, but he gave only one answer: her name was Zora. Years later, when Cole stood at the edge of Earth's newest research station, he told her story to anyone who would listen. Not a story about war or monsters or swelling curiosities, but about a girl from a forgotten planet who taught him what it meant to feel. And though no one ever found her again, her light still lived inside him, glowing gently, just like it did the day she saved his life. Asterisk.